Falmouth is purpose-built. It's built primarily as a cruise port. It's not a conversion from a cargo port. So that allows us some flexibility. But also we're part of a big historic district. So our approach is where we want local residents to participate in a port. A cruise passenger is part of the experience, and so is land-based tourism. Falmouth is on the north coast of Jamaica between Ocho Rios and Montego Bay. It was a historic port from the 17th and 18th century, and we had to create a place that would not only represent the history of Jamaica, but also facilitate guests to those existing port destinations as well. This is a photo from Falmouth, Jamaica in the 1850s. It was one of the most successful ports and one of the wealthiest cities in the New World. And at that time, sugar was king, and Falmouth looked very much like it does in this picture. And one of our goals here is when people come to Jamaica, it's not just about Bob Marley and some other things, it's actually about the history of the Caribbean. So our job was to make sure the guest expectation of coming to Jamaica was reflected in the way it looked back then and also now. We designed the wharf primarily to also minimize the environmental conditions of bringing a ship into the inner harbor. The harbor was built originally for ships that were 60, 70, 80 feet long, cargo vessels from the 17th and 18th century. We had to put in Oasis-class ships. So what we did was we aligned both berths to align with the small opening, the narrow opening we have in the coral reef. It created this triangular wharf design. But that also gave us an added benefit to make the wharf not a pier, but a neighborhood. And it became a neighborhood attached to the existing city. And the concept is really to allow the guests to feel like the new port is not an all-inclusive destination, but it's part of their city. We were able to extend all of the existing streets. The street plan was done in 1733, so when we laid out the streets on the wharf, we allowed those streets to actually go all the way out into the wharf. So if you're in the downtown, you can be standing next to a building that was authentically built in 1750 to 1850, and you look down the street, you look out to the new wharf design, and you can actually see all the way out to where the ships are located on the wharf. We very much believe in architectural integrity and making sure that the architectural destination. So there's the courthouse built in 1850, and there's the new terminal building that we're building now. Actually, it'll be complete in the next few weeks. We want to make sure that the guests, when they arrive, they have that great sense of arrival. We think that's key to making the destination memorable. The warehouse designs. We actually created these long warehouses, which are replications of the warehouses that were actually built in the 1850s. So rather than building a very efficient building, this was certainly more expensive for the developer, and in this case, which was Royal Caribbean and the Port Authority of Jamaica, but we wanted to be authentic. And guess what? When you're standing on the ship and you're looking down, you don't see any mechanical spaces on top of the roofs. No air conditioning ducts, no large generation plants, no water tanks, no storage facilities. What do? You see Georgian roof design. It's more expensive, but what does it do? The guests walk out and they go, wow, that looks pretty cool down there. I think I'll get off. These are really luxurious ships now. It's hard to get some folks off. You know, it's a pretty nice destination. They look down, they see a beautifully landscaped, historic neighborhood. What happens? More guests get off, more commerce happens, the destination is memorable, everybody wins. This is the design of the two ships. It's designed for a high capacity. Royal Caribbean will actually have turnaround days, which will have an Oasis, as you see pictured on the left, and a Freedom class ship pictured on the right. Our design day is 16,000 passengers. That's much greater than any, and in some cases, there's only 17,000 people live in Falmouth. So on a design day, we double the population in Falmouth pretty much in the morning between 7 and 8 a.m. So you need to understand those capacities, and the design of the wharf allowed us to add additional 11 acres so that we can disperse those people evenly very quickly and they don't overrun the small community of Falmouth. Everyone who first notices when you come into Falmouth, you're going to notice the courthouse. You're also going to notice the parish council, the Anglican cathedral that was built in the late 1700s. You look out and you start to see these historic buildings. The port authorities and the tourism boards really have to work hard to make sure the key buildings that you see from the ship are open, that they're restored, that they're in good condition. They become part of museums, or in our case, a foundry yard with the working artists and craftsmen. You got to make sure you extend the guest experience off the port property and into the city. What that does is it then makes the city embrace your project, and it's not an us versus them mentality. We put residential. We look now at actually populating a site. You know, it's the old McDonald's theory. McDonald's didn't serve breakfast. They used to open from 11 to 11. They had all these wonderful destinations, all these wonderful corners all over the world. They started serving breakfast in the morning. 60% of the revenue comes from breakfast now. Ports are the same way. Juan mentioned these facilities sometimes sit empty. You know, a movie theater, for example, has about a 16% occupancy. How many of you want to be in a business where you're only using 16% of your facility? The idea is make this part of the community. Put residential components, bring in a 24-hour clock, make sure that the port facilities and that infrastructure, which many of you are paying for, is used more than, like you say, 8 or 10 hours a day. The port is part of the city. It should reflect the character and image of that city. I'm so amazed when you come into a port in the Caribbean, there's no landscape. Does anybody notice that? You come into a port and it's all just concrete warehouses, and here are these people's expectation. You go back to that postcard. Oh wow, I'm going to the Caribbean. I expect to get off in this beautiful, tropical destination. You pull in and there's 75 warehouses, big tank farm, a lot of concrete and asphalt. It's just not that destination. So it makes a huge difference. If you want to get more guests off, make sure you put landscape. And you'll see here, this is the arrival plaza. The arrival plaza here also, as Juan was also speaking, is multi-purpose. It can hold a concert of 6,000 attendees. It's a great public space. It's a huge park. It gives us a chance to utilize the space, and it becomes the largest park for the people of Falmouth and Trelawney, which is the parish that it's located. So now they have this beautiful new people space, which is part of the existing new wharf facility. Too many times, and certainly Jamaica had a history of the all-inclusives. Yeah, a lot of guests came, but they never did what? They never walked outside the walls. Ports can become that way too, and they become an integral part of the cities. In many of the port destinations in the Caribbean, for example, those are the hearts of the cities. And when you pick big walls up and you put a lot of cargo boxes and you stack them 6, 8, 9 boxes tall, what happens? You cut the city off from the ocean. So the idea is make sure the locals can participate. The cruise passenger is an important component, but they also want to see the local guests. How many of you have ever arrived in your own port of call from a cruise ship? How many from your own port of call? Everyone in here, first thing you do when you leave, go call your travel agent, go book a trip, and come to your own port. You know why? The perspective of that ship coming into your harbor is absolutely, completely different from what you think it is. And when you come into town, see what you look at. It's very, very important for that sense of arrival. When you come into Falmouth now, and I have to admit, I haven't done it in Falmouth yet, but I will on Tuesday. When we come in, you got to look down and see what you see. It's the approach of the ship. And what you're going to see is much like that first picture you saw. You're going to see a lot of Georgian rooftops, low-profile buildings. It was protected from growth because the National Highway went around Falmouth, so all those buildings are still there. So when you look down from the 19 stories of an Oasis-class ship, you're going to be looking down on a Georgian village just like it was preserved really from the late 1700s, early 1800s. Guess what? More people get off. Juan, you might correct me, but I believe almost 90% of the folks got off the first royal ship the first day it ever called. And we're still under construction. But I saw the photos from the top decks of the ship looking down, and what did you see? You saw a Georgian town. That was compelling. Design the cruise port from the guest perspective. That's one of the roles that we play, and one of the things we do a little different. I just think from the guest side. Everybody says, yeah, Darley, you're really expensive when you think that way because you make the port cost more. But also our yields are higher. One of the things I learned at Disney, you tell a great story, people will buy it, and you can set your price. Tell the story of the destination in its design. Don't just pick an arbitrary design. Take the history, the culture of your port, make sure it's incorporated into your design criteria. Make it look like what the guest expectation is. They're really not on an eclectic trip. If they're coming to your destination, they have in their mind what they think it should be. Involve the community. You cannot be an us versus them. If the port is not embraced by the community, it is not going to be successful. That way you get more fences, more walls, more security positions. No, what you want is to be embraced. I love the European models because those cities embrace their ports. And it's very key to make sure that we do that, particularly here in the Caribbean. Provide limited secure zones. Don't make the whole place secure. That's the easy way out. What you want to do is you want to create security zones where you need them. But you want the city to feel like this is part of their community as well. Build it as a neighborhood. And then the last thing is define your unique brand. Don't tell someone else's story. Make sure that your consultants, that your designers, and that the cruise lines understand the story you want to tell and be a good storyteller. Thank you very much.